Hey guys, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? I'm hanging in. Today I'm going to read The Key to the Universe. Going to finally finish number 7 and start number 8. Very excited. Before I do that, please hit that like button. You're helping me, you're helping out the content in this channel, and I appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. I put a lot of different books out, and I have some fun things I might tackle very soon. And please share if you feel inclined to do so, and it's okay if you don't. Are you ready? Chapter 30. The 7th letter, Zane. He produced Zane, predominant in movement, crowned it, combined and formed it with Gemini in the universe, Sivan, June, in the year, and the left foot of man, Sefer Yitzra'ah. The 7th letter, Zane, Z, is one of the simple letters and is connected with the sign Gemini. Its radical meaning is a sword or weapon, while hieroglyphically it means an arrow, but the meaning suggesting the idea of conquest. Just as number 7 is the perfection of the first step or period in man's cycle of unfoldment, so this letter indicates that the forces represented by the letters we have already studied have reached the end of the first arcana, the outbreathing of the first mother letter, air, and have laid down certain principles which are shown in action by the letter Zane. Zane represents man when he has reached a step where he can understand the underlying principles of life, and by the power of his perfected manhood grasp them in his hands as a weapon with which to carve his own destiny. Only so can he rule, for the meaning of Zane is also a scepter. At this step in his perfected manhood, man has become a conqueror with the kingly ability to rule first himself, then all nature, and with the power to defend, preserve, and use the mystical weapon bestowed upon every victor, namely the sword of the spirit, or the fiery sword of the magician. The Zane is the fulfillment or perfection of the which was breathed out by the mother Elf. For the victory of number 7 is obtained by a complete mastery of the breath. The words that are spoken must be words of love and words of healing. The victor who holds the sword or weapon Zane in his hand must have gained absolute control of his speech. For in one sense, his weapon is the mighty weapon of the tongue, to which so many allusions are made in the Bible. In Psalms, we read, quote, whose teeth are spears and arrows, their tongue a sharp sword, end quote. Again, quote, who whet their tongue like a sword and shoot out their arrows, even bitter words, end quote. And again in Proverbs, quote, there is that speaketh like the piercing of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health, end quote. Again, quote, death and life are in the power of the tongue, end quote. Also, at the great invitation, we hear Job asking, quote, is there inquiry in my tongue, end quote. Hence, it is quite fitting that as the manifestations of the first cemetery may be called the children of the first mother, Elf, air, they should be completed and the victory gained by the mastery of the tongue. As we have said elsewhere, quote, speech is one of the greatest powers, for it includes the powers of sound, number, color, and when written, form. To bring to your minds some of the practical effects of this power, we would ask you for one day to note carefully the effect of your words have on those about you. Many pupils ask for something practical to do to develop occult powers and manifest the higher life. Noting the effect of your words is practical and most important, and a practice which can be indulged in without fear or dangerous consequences. And until at least some conception of the power of speaking kindly and lovingly, but to some purpose and some degree of mastery over it has been obtained, the development of other occult powers will be retarded, if not actually prevented. The relation of Zane to the sign Gemini is in the idea that Gemini rules the arms and represents also the masculine and feminine qualities combined. Only he who has raised his arms in blessing and his blended masculine and feminine qualities within himself can be called the victor over the power of the tongue. Another aspect of Gemini is the two opposing forces to which man in his unregenerative state is bound. As St. Paul said, quote, "When I would do good, behold, evil is present with me," end quote. Hence, the victor must have found the perfect blending of these pairs of opposites and must know how to use them to help on his further advance, the ability to accomplish which is symbolized by the arms. Quote, "When thou hast passed into the seventh, O happy one, thou shalt perceive no more the sacred three, for thou shalt have become the three thyself," end quote. Blavatsky. Tarot card time. The seventh card, the Chariot. Notice the symbolism here. The seventh tarot card, the Chariot. And this in the tarot, the seventh card is called the Chariot and is represented by a conqueror crowned with a coronet composed of 3 pentagrams of gold. He stands in a chariot having the form of a cubic stone, having over him an azure canopy supported by 4 columns and having 14 stars over his head. He has 3 right angles upon his breast, and upon his shoulders the and Thummim, represented by 2 crescent moons, one on either side. He carries in his right hand a scepter surmounted by a globe, a square, and a triangle. In his left hand he has a fiery sword. Upon the square front of his chariot is a lingam and a winged spear of the Egyptians, while 2 sphinxes, one black and one white, draw the chariot, each straining in the opposite direction, yet both looking toward the right and the other absolute control of the driver. This card symbolizes the main characteristics of the sacred cemetery. It represents man who has become the conqueror, master both of himself and the elements, making the cube now become the philosopher's stone, his chariot, the heavens his canopy, the 2 sphinxes, the force of the great agent black and white magic, his servants to bear him onward. His cuirass is the breastplate of righteousness, or his knowledge of the manifestations of the divine, which makes him vulnerable to assaults from either the human or elemental kingdoms. The and the Thummim upon his shoulders indicate his priestly power to answer all questions, though and through direct inspiration from the divine. The globe on the scepter, surmounted by the square and triangle, indicates the 7-fold powers of man rising from the circle. The scepter corresponds to the magic wand mentioned above, while the fiery sword is the sword of the spirit, which he has gained the victory. Quote, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." Exodus. Since we know number 7 is a number of perfection, especially the perfection of humanity, which will prevail when, through the power of number 6 and the 5 senses, have evolved into 7, we can readily understand that to commit adultery has a far greater significance than the one generally ascribed to it. For to adulterate is to add some foreign and inferior substance to the thing adulterated. Also, a thing is said to be adulterated when not absolutely pure and exactly what is purports to be. It has been the custom to confine this seventh commandment exclusively to the creative functions, but while we conclude the importance of obeying its literal meaning, still we must not make the mistake of confining it solely to the meaning. The fact that number 7 of perfection and yet deals with the creative powers of man is, to say the least, significant. A perfect humanity is one in which the creative powers have not been adulterated, but while fully functioning and under the absolute control of the will, are used in love, purity, wisdom to create, which is needed, unadulterated by lust or any of the lower cardinal desires, and with full recognition that the great creative force is creative on all planes, that it becomes sex force only when it functions through the sex centers. And as we are responsible for the use of that great force through all centers, it must be kept pure and unadulterated if we would conquer death and the grave. In itself, it is the mightiest agent entrusted to humanity. In fact, its use is the great test of humanity of this globe. It is true historic significance it is so far above man's present conception of it that only he evolves the 6 and 7 senses can be understand and master all its possibilities. Mankind of today, in dense ignorance of its divine origin and purpose, is wallowing in the mere created by the perversion of its lowest aspects. Only when we really know its true essence and function through our own divine illumination and have tested and proven them for experience, in fact, only when we have been able to look this mightily problem in the face with a pure heart and an understanding mind and know it its pure and unadulterated state, we can take the 7th step. We must create each step we can take it, and if we confine the great creative force to its functions in the flesh, we live in the flesh. And so long as we presume to judge the God who made us and gave us this force, and say that we all use of the creative force is evil and belongs only to the unregenerated man, we must remain unregenerate. For we have turned our backs on the very power given to us, bringing about our regeneration and create our next step. Therefore, let us cease to adulterate our conceptions of the divine power with the misconceptions which have their origin in ignorance, aestheticism, fear, prudery, and the self-righteous thought that we are better to judge of what is pure than the God who made us, and use for their highest ends all the powers given us. Nor must the divine wisdom handed down throughout the ages. Only thus can we truly obey the 7th commandment. Since we never try to kill anything that we do not consider harmful or vile, the very fact that the unenlightened place this mightily force on the head of all evil things and give it over to what they are pleased to term the devil helps to make the devil so an actual entity, built up through the ages of man's perverted thought forces and vivified and strengthened daily by the votive offerings of those who create him out of the very force which should make man a god. It is any wonder then that the devil lives and thrives and exerts a vile, degenerating, and disintegrating influence upon mankind. For every outpouring of life force, which the unenlightened mind of man bans as vile, goes to prolong the life and strengthen the powers of the devil and his angels. For the thought of evil creates evil thought forms. Hence, that power given to man with which to reach divinity, which should bring him to number 7, make him perfect even as his Father in heaven is perfect, has been adulterated and used to bring about imperfection, and death. Therefore, until we learn the real essence of this seventh commandment by heart and exemplify it in thought and life, the angel with the flaming sword will forever bar us from returning to our spiritual home in the Garden of Eden. Ooh. Chapter 31, number 8. So I'm going to start this. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I want to get in as much as possible. Number 7 was really long. Quote, where is thy individuality, Lano? Where the Lano himself? It is the spark lost in the fire, the drop within the ocean, the ever-present ray become the all and the eternal radiance. End quote. The voice of silence, Blavatsky. Number 8 is the number of evolution, and it's connected with the spiral motion of cycles. It is a number of the inevitable and onward rush of time. Its symbol is the hourglass, also the balance. It is also the winged globe of the Egyptians and the bird of life of the Hindus, which carries man from the realm of earth, the lower of the 8, to the higher realms, the upper of the 8. According to Stinson Jarvis, quote, our word 8 names the horse god. His Celtic name is A, and 8 hours. These 8 horses, or hour signs, are still shown harnessed abreast in the carvings of Java, which illustrate our day God's car. The 8 chambers name the 8 hours, 8 horses, 8 notes, 8 divisions of the compass, and every other 8 of the oct or oak god, who is oct or 8. The same naming of the 8 god or oct was continued in the great tower and temple of Belos in Babylon. This was divided into 8 separate towers. The Greeks have the O's, naming the son of the great O, or Omega, and the moon called Omicron. I don't know if I could say that on here. Oh. Or circle small. Those 2 O's named the sun and moon, on which all time calculations were made, and the oak god or oct was supposed to be both of them in one. Consequently, he was fully named by the figure 8, and oct, ogd, oct, name 8 in the Celtic, Gaelic, Latin, and Greek. Therefore, we see that they were all one deity under different names, but fully represented by the figure 8, which shows the small moon above the large sun, or the above the omega, and thus names the deity who was both moon and sun in one. Father Smitty wonders why the Druids seem to pay such deep respect to number 8, but this proceeded from their science, because their service of praise was nearly all vibrational to produce unity of mind through song, and the oct god song or octave was composed of 8 notes. Many writers give to number 8 a most sinister interpretation. They attribute to it all that is unfortunate, imperfection, privation, loss, ruin, decay, corruption, and death. While it may While it may present such aspects, they are fearsome only to those who do not know the meaning and object of evolution. Those who refuse to face conditions which the great law brings for their instruction and unfoldment, where evolution means ever becoming, That which has fulfilled its cycle of manifestation must give place to something higher, that which is in perfection, because only in part must be superseded by the more and more perfect. The less evolved forms of life suffer the lack of only that which must be the ultimate result of the step, as the child is deprived of the ripe wisdom of man, although it has all the faculties by which to acquire that wisdom in the course of growth. That which is lost is that out of which the law of evolution has absorbed the life force, as rind of an orange is thrown away when the substance of the orange is extracted. Ruin, decay, corruption, and death are all phases of life expression. The rind of an orange may decay, become corrupt, and seemingly die, yet the life substance in it is reabsorbed by the elements from which there will again be evolved a new form of life. Quote, for we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect is come, then that which is the part shall be done away, end quote. To those who bestride the bird of life and boldly face each step in evolution, no matter what it may hold, for them, number 8 is a symbol of the good law. Quote, the wheel of the good law moves swiftly on. It grinds by night and day. The worthless husks it drives from out of the golden grain. The refuse from the flower. The hand of karma guides the wheel. The revolutions mark the beatings of the karmic heart, end quote. Since the evolution can advance only by reaping that which is sown, number 8 is perfectly symbol of balance or cause and effect. It is a number of the ceaseless breath of the cosmos, the out-breathing and in-breathing by which the equilibrium of the soul is obtained. It breathes into man the ideals from the higher spheres and draws up the lower spheres of personality. His lower ideals, man ideals, are therefore but the divine ideals for deformed and colored by his limited conception and understanding of them. Just as man breathes in pure air and breathes out the same air tainted and more or less polluted by the volatile waste products of his system, according to the health and purity of his body, is man's outgoing breath pure and sweet, and according to his oneness with the higher self, the purity of his thoughts, can man breathe out or manifest the ideals indrawn from the higher realms. The path of the psychic breath in the body forms a perfect figure 8. This, however, must be understood from its stoic aspect, for there are many mysteries connected with the breath, all of which pertain to man's evolution. In number 4, we have squared and laid our cornerstone as far as our physical expression is concerned, and in number 7, have erected our temple of the living God, and are now ready to inaugurate the priestly office in it, by means of which we are enabled to enter into a higher circle of number 8, where, behold, all things to us become new. In short, we are now ready to die to the old, for which reason the ancients called number 8 death. But like so-called physical death, this death is but an evolution into the higher state of life. Another conception of number 8 is that of the perpetual and regular flow of life currents of the universe, the evil being consumed to make way for the good. If we find a bad crop this season, we plow it under and sow a better crop next season, thus working with the law of eternal motion or evolution toward ultimate completion. The Gnostic teachings postulate 7 interpenetrating spheres surrounded by an 8, which is composed of the leftovers of unredeemed forces left behind by the 7-fold chain of spheres in their onward rush of evolution. This 8th sphere is one of the absolute darkness, hence is often called the dark star, and its motion is so much slower than the earth chain to which it belongs that it greatly retards the chain's progress. It is out of the 8th sphere that at the dawn of the next great world period, the materials will be gathered to form a new sevenfold earth chain, just as the eighth note in the music, while a repetition of the first, is nevertheless the beginning of a newer and higher octave. This process is alluded to in the teachings of the Gnostic Marcus as follows, quote, now the motion of these seven spheres is exceedingly rapid, whereas the eighth sphere is much slower than the motion of the seven mutually interpenetrating spheres, and as it were balances the balance of number 8, or checks their otherwise too rapid motion by pressure on their periphery, end quote. Number 8 may be compared to the power belt, which transmit the power from the drive wheel of the engine to the power wheel of a machine. And curiously enough, such belts are usually crossed in the exact shape of a figure 8. Nearly all symbols or objects having the shape of number 8 convey the fundamental idea of evolution, the transmission of force of one cycle or form in the next higher expression. It is at the point of crossing over, therefore, that we must expect to meet the dread dweller on the threshold, who will bar our way until our courage has been provided. Only fortitude and determination at this step can prove that we have learned the lessons of the lower wheel and have demonstrated our fitness to pass on and receive the imitation which must precede our entrance into number 9. This is the crucifixion, or the dying upon the cross, of the personality. The Christ, the only begotten Son of God, may rise and sit forever at the right hand of his Father. Only by the way of the cross, via crucis, can man become more than man. The dweller who awaits us at the threshold of our new life is the synthesis of all those mistakes and unredeemed creations which we have pushed behind us during our struggle to reach the perfection of number 7. For it is our lower evolution. There are many things which we have not the strength completely to conquer, yet we progress in spite of them, for such things are merciful, held back until we grow to spiritual manhood. But ere we can pass this crucial step, we must meet and redeem them in the person of our dweller on the threshold of new life, just as they await us in the lesser degree of every new step upon the path. But here they must be faced, recognized, conquered, and transmuted, ere we can enter the circle of the higher evolution. By some writers, this dweller is described as a frightful monster of so terrible of mien that at sight of him the candidate is either paralyzed by the fear or in rare cases driven mad by horror. This occurs, however, only in the extreme cases where the pupil has failed to conquer fear during the earlier steps of where he has persistently denied all evil and refuses to face and recognize his faults and failings, hence has made no effort to redeem them. But the student who has lived close to divine love and who has recognized his power to redeem his creation will have little to fear at this step, for the recognition of the power of the Christ within the student has learned how gradually to redeem the dweller in his daily steps along the path. In fact, he has has grown familiar with his face, hence is not applied. He knows that he can conquer all that his evolution brings to him. Many students are puzzled to know how they will meet the dweller or know when they are upon the threshold of initiation, but there are many experiences which to one who is truly watching will indicate it, and many ways to meet the dweller will appear. Some have a symbolic dream or a vision or experience the life itself brings it to their recognition. One student relates that he had the following dream. He dreamed he stood before a small entrance, which seemed to lead into a vast hall. He was eager to enter, but at the door stood a monstrous giant with drawn sword, barring the entrance. Seated near the doorway behind a small table was a huge Mongolian noble the student sought to enter the doorway, the keeper demanded a fee. On asking how much was the pay, the student was told 70 cents. He handed the doorkeeper 75 cents, but the Mongolian would not let him in until he had paid the exact amount, telling him it was impossible to pay more than was demanded. Then the giant lowered his sword and let the student enter. The symbology here is that very plain, for 70 cents symbolizes 7 complete cycles of 10. And only when the candidate for initiation can give to the doorkeeper the value of 7 complete cycles can enter the narrow gate, which is the crossing point of number 8. A fault which gives the dweller great power, and which is a great shock when first realized by the candidate, is self-righteous and spiritual pride. The person whose dweller has been built up through the grosser sins of selfishness, greed, drunkenness, lust, knows all along that he's violating the law and rather expects to pay the penalty sometime. In fact, has in all probability had many glimpses of the dweller and knows full well it is his own creation, hence is not so appalled at his handiwork when seen in full. He is therefore more readily to recognize it as his own creation than the self-righteous person who has lived so long in his artificial sanctuary that he cannot believe the dweller to be his. Once having successfully faced the dweller and entered the higher circle of evolution in number 8, we now meet Saturn, the great tester and initiator, whose number is 9. For Saturn is the magistrate of the justice of God, karma. He beareth the balance of the sword. For him to commit, weight, and measure and number. The initiator should not be confused with the dweller, for the latter is an entity of our own creation, while the initiator is one of the Elohim, or sons of God, spoken by Job. He first appears to us in grim death, the reaper, but as such he comes first to teach us to conquer fear, and second, that we may prove to ourselves the power of man uplifted and sustained by the divine within, to conquer even death, to prove that there is no death. For if we rest in the one life, the divine breath manifesting through number 8 will sweep us safely past this point of crossing. Quote, perfect love casteth out fear, end quote. Hence, long ere we reach the step we should have learned, in whom we trust, then is death swallowed up in victory. If we do find the spiral of evolution like number 8, manifesting to us decay and dissolution, this merely proves that only as the old and useless husks decay can the seed sprout and bring forth. It is ruin only in the sense that the breaking of the shell by evolving sprout means ruin. Only as the shell is broken can the kernel of the nut be extracted. Number 8 should not be regarded as privation, imperfection, corruption, or loss, except as we gladly lose the lower or lesser to obtain the higher and greater, or just as a child breaks and ruins or is deprived of its old toys when the time comes in its evolution to take up the serious business of life. Here we gladly lay aside the old thoughts, the old bonds of flesh, even our old ideas of beliefs, especially the thought of our greatness and power, the ability of the unaided personally to meet and conquer all physical conditions, for only all these old conceptions fall away from us one by one, decay, and return to their original elements. Are we ready to pass through the narrow gate and be weighed in the balance of perfect justice? So I'm going to leave it there. I hope you all enjoyed. Next time we will venture more into the number 8 as it continues. Sending each and every one of you love and light. Please make sure you hit that like button, you share and subscribe to my channel. If you haven't done so already, it helps me out greatly. If you have it within you to give me a love donation, that would be very appreciated. I made it to May, but I don't know if I'm going to make it to June. So any help is help. So I want to thank everybody, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.